Here we go!
Let's go! This is KIC Radio.
Hello, welcome back to the South Bank podcast. I'm today joined by Cam Gorman. We've got plenty to discuss today, but before we get into what has been a roller coaster of a week, a particular roller coaster for the last 48 hours, how have you been away from the football, Cameron?
I've been pretty good, Jacob, but as always, there is something affecting my mental health, and that is Wolverhampton Wanderers on a football pitch and outside of it. Not the best atmosphere around the club in recent weeks. I think if we touch briefly on West Ham, a fight there and then another fight this week, clearly showing a disconnect between fans, players, and staff. Not looking too great, but I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, so usually a podcast in which you've had two games to cover would fill the void, really, of what we have to talk about, but it barely scratches the surface. In fact, the football matches that have been played almost seem a bit irrelevant at this point to what is the greater content. But you mentioned two fights after the game. It's funny because we showed more fights after the game in the last couple of weeks than we have shown on the pitch. But yeah, no papering over the cracks. Gary O'Neill has been sacked. He's no longer Wolverhampton Wanderers manager. And to link it into them fights off the pitch, is this too late? Is it just papering over the crack? Was the dressing room clearly lost? What are your thoughts?
Well, personally, I think Gary O'Neill has been told to leave his job mainly due to the fan pressure, mainly due to all the noise outside of the club by the media. And I feel Gary O'Neill is the only option that could really change. We know, as from the atmosphere at the game, as for all the news surrounding the club the past few weeks, but the real problem here are Fosun and their ownership. They've really left us in this mess that we currently find ourselves in. And Gary O'Neill being told to leave is a decision that ultimately many Wolves fans will feel has come far too late. We were calling for his head after shot losses against Brentford, Bournemouth, the Everton 4-0. And there's been numerous results where you think, this is the one. El Sakiko, he didn't even get sacked then. And then finally, after a 2-1 home defeat to Ipswich, he's finally been told to leave. But the replacements aren't looking too great, in my opinion. Many that were sounded out by the club have rejected us due to our ownership and transfer model. And it looks like it's going to be Vitor Pereira, although I'm sure we will get onto that later in the podcast. I'm just really not sure where we go from here. There seems to be a complete disconnect between the players, the fans, the owners, and hopefully a new coach coming in can help unite at least the dressing room and start getting some results on the pitch with new manager bounce. But who knows where it will go? This is Wolves we're talking about, and we never like to do things the easy way.
Yeah, like you say, we will look forward to the future in later part of the podcast. But yeah, for me, this is a new low as a Wolves supporter. For me, it feels like even when we were down in League One in them Championship seasons, there wasn't this much of a disconnect between the fans, the players, ultimately the manager. It feels like, disgraceful scenes for me after both West Ham and Ipswich. You can't be as role models as professional footballers losing your heads like that, no matter the scenario. Mario Lemina stripped of a captaincy this week because of his actions after West Ham, which for me, Lemina was average at best in that West Ham game. And, as a captain, as a leader, it's down to you to put your hands up and try and pick up the team after, such a damaging result. Not do what you did. And then we see this week, Ryan Aït-Nouri having to be dragged off by Craig Dawson alongside other members of our squad, getting a second yellow card, which now means he is suspended for Leicester, which will be a massive miss because We
Shocking.
have no other left backs in the club.
And
We saw,
not even that, Mateus Cunha as well, having complete head loss, grabbing the glasses off one of the Ipswich town coaching staff. And while we Wolves fans might find that a little bit funny, it's not really looking funny when we look at our fixture list, who looks like another miss for the Leicester game, who will probably have some sort of ban handed to him by the FA. And I can easily see like a 5-game ban being the case for something like that, and elbowing someone. I don't think you can really get away with that, especially in today's day and age where there's cameras everywhere pointing at you. These players are under immense scrutiny as it is, but when this is how they're representing the club, when we're being branded the banter team of the Premier League, when we're being branded as hotheads who just want to fight, we show more fight, like you said, after the full-time whistle than we do in these games. Their body language from the first half, from the first whistle, was shocking, I thought, against Ipswich. The players seemed to not care. They seemed to not want it. And they all seemed to be getting frustrated at one another. And it was only when certain personnel came into the team in the second half that things slightly changed. However, I'm sure we'll move on to the game later, but I just am really disappointed in the attitudes of all those involved.
yeah, I mean, like, it's already come to see a bit of a scramble of a podcast here because there's just so much that has happened in this last week. You know, if you're anything like me, the last 48 hours have entailed you looking at your phone for updates every 10 minutes of just what is going on at this football club. Like you say, Mateus Cunha, the problem really arises with the elbow. You know, the stealing of the glasses, it's rather comical. You know, you're probably not going to get a ban for that, but the elbow, it's ridiculous, especially on, no disrespect to the man he did it to, someone who is ultimately irrelevant in what was the cause of the game. You know, what need is an elbow a member of the backroom staff? And
Needless.
what spoke volumes to me was Pedro Lima holding back Mateus Cunha. Pedro Lima was brought in under the impression that Mateus Cunha was always going to be his guide this season. Seeing him being the one to hold back Cunha just speaks volumes as to, you know, how all over the place the club is, and that comes from the very top. You know, there was very crude chants towards Jeff Sheep throughout the game this weekend. Even when we were 1-0 behind, it was the chant going around, and there's been photo out chants for weeks now.
It was the only time we sang, I think.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, I'm always an advocate of getting behind the players, but can you blame these fans for feeling frustrated or being flat when they're paying Champions League prices for championship level football? And that might be even offensive to people like Oxford United, because I think they give us a run for our money at the moment. So championship football might be an overstatement there. There was obviously a graphic shown after the West Ham game, which infuriated a lot of Wolves fans with our net spend. Wolves barely spending a quarter of what they've made in profit in these last 2 years. And they can't even hide behind FFP anymore, even though they tried to, because they came out before last season saying that we are no longer governed by FFP. But the lack of investment has led us to this point. And I personally think Gary O'Neill being sacked just papers over the cracks. I believe the bigger problem still lies here, and I'm pretty sure you probably agree with that, Cameron.
Yeah, I have to agree, Jacob. I do fear that for Wolves, ultimately, the writing is on the wall. I think Gary O'Neill barely scratches the surface. It's just the tip of the iceberg, really, in terms of where the problems are. It really does feel like the Wolves' hot seat at the moment is a poison chalice. I don't see who wants to come in. I don't see where we're getting a replacement, with all the potential replacements for the club originally sounded out as the perfect candidates for the role, all rejecting us. We do look like we have a replacement in Vitor Pereira, but when your club is embroiled in a relegation battle and the dressing room is in disarray, you don't want to be looking to the Saudi league for your manager. And while there are a lot of good personnel, good players, good managers in the Saudi league who are getting these enormous paydays by being there, when you're in a relegation battle, you need someone with Premier League experience, I feel. And I don't think Vitor Pereira is going to fare well in that sense. I don't think he's going to necessarily have time to adjust to understanding how the Premier League works tactically. We don't have crunch time. It's now or never for Wolves. And if we don't get out of this mess quickly, we're gone. It really feels like we already might be. When you're losing 2-1 at home to Ipswich, you can't help but feel you deserve to go down. And I hate to say it, I think we will. I really don't see a way out of this mess, but either way, we'll be here week in, week out to back the boys, and that's what we've got to give as fans. But I think even ourselves as fans, we have some sense of accountability. I don't think we give enough in terms of atmosphere. I don't think we try to get behind the team. The ground was silent the majority of the game against Ipswich. However, when prices are going up, when the quality of football is poor, what is there to sing about? So it just shows where we are as a club at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, before we get on to Vital Player, I do slightly disagree about the fans not getting behind the players. It's a very toxic environment, and there is a bit of a disconnect at the moment, naturally, because of how poor what we're seeing on the pitch is. But between the Jeff G is a certain nasty word and Fosun out chance, there were chances of Wolverhampton Wanderers, and come on, we were trying to get up. Obviously, it's not going to be rocking like it was under Nuno times, because football fans, as much as we don't want to admit it, are a fickle bunch. When it's not going forward, any club suddenly becomes flat, becomes not as potent as they once were. But we get up to.
It felt to me, sorry, Jacob, to interrupt. It felt to me we only started having these chants though when we scored a goal, and that came seemingly out of nowhere. But it was only after that we really got behind the team, started to back them, and then the team ran their socks off. They were gassed out by the end, and then we know how a corner ends for this team. So
yeah, I mean, I believe me and your mom actually just. There was a glance just at a moment of just like, we know what's coming here. As soon as Gary O'Neill kicking a water bottle down the dugout, and he knew what was coming straight away, which doesn't exude much confidence. But if one manager goes out, another manager comes in. Obviously, it's very much looking for Fabrizio Romano reporting that Vitor Pereira will be the new manager of Wolverhampton Wanderers. Could even have an announcement whilst this podcast is being recorded or before this podcast goes out. So you mentioned the names originally linked: Graham Potter, David Moyes, Conceição,
Allegri even.
I mean, I don't know why we went to Allegri. That was like me approach.
That's embarrassing.
That was like me approaching Megan Fox. It was never going to happen. But these names ultimately turned us down because of Fosun wanting to be self-sustainable as a club, which speaks volumes just how poorly run this football club is. I reposted a tweet the other day from Roy Leicester about how we are the poorest run club in the league, and by some distance. There's many clubs in this league that complain about their owners, but I don't think there's another club in the league that are making so much profit out of a club and not investing into this club. But there is a slight bit of investment within this manager because he has a €1 million release clause.
Wow.
Oh my God. Wolverhampton Wanderers are spending money. But to me, this managerial appointment seems like he is Portuguese, so I would believe he's a Mendes client. Would I be right in saying? I don't know if you know.
I feel like that's likely the case. However, just to touch on something about that 1 million release clause, I saw quite a funny bit of news. While we might think, wow, Wolves are going to spend money, even if it is what is pennies to Fosun, apparently he's even willing to pay this release clause himself because he wants to move to the Premier League that badly. And knowing our ownership, I wouldn't be surprised if they made him do it, because it's reported that, obviously, managing in Saudi for a couple of years now, Vitor Pereira, money is not an issue for him. And he has reportedly said that it's enough for his kids and his kids' kids and whatever. So fair enough. Why wouldn't you want to make that step up to the Premier League if you think you're good enough? However, when the manager seems willing to pay his own release clause, it makes you also wonder, folks, get yourselves up. Dust your wallet out.
To me, we know that Saudi Arabia is a lovely, lovely place, but can have its downsides. And we've all seen a viral clip that's been spread around for the last couple of hours of a slight falling out between one of the Saudi representatives of the league and Pereira in a press conference. To me, not enough people are saying, I think that might be a reason why he's so desperate to get out of Saudi. I feel like there might be a bit of
Perhaps
angst between the Saudi league and Pereira, but we don't know that. However, currently at Al Shabab, a certain Daniel Pedent playing under him, he does currently have a 53% win percentage at his current job, which, obviously, I'm no mathematician, but that means he's winning more games than he's losing. But obviously, we know the level of the Saudi league is not the Premier League.
Yeah, not exactly a balanced league, in my opinion. And when you have quality players on your side, such as Ava Benega, previously Alfred Ndai also played for this team, another Wolves man. Daniel Pedence obviously being there. When you have some cut above players, it's no surprise to me that you should be getting those results in a league like that. Whereas when he comes to Wolves, it's not like we have many of those figurehead players, other than, say, Mateus Cunha, who will probably be suspended for his first game. And it's not a suitable step up, in my opinion. When he had success in his managerial career, it was long ago. It was 2012 to 13 and 2011 to 12 that he won his league titles for Porto. So we're looking a long way back to when he bolstered his managerial CV.
Yeah.
However, an interesting bit of information I do have for you, Jacob, is in his career, the possible next Wolves manager has managed against 5 current Premier League managers. And the records are very mixed. So 2 of those were while he was Porto boss. And there is a Nuno Espirito Santo and a Marco Silva of Fulham, who he came against, who he obviously had a far better team than, with Nuno managing Rio Ave and Marco Silva managing Estoril at the time. But he is unbeaten against both of these managers, with 3 wins, 1 draw against Marco Silva, and 2 wins, 1 draw against Nuno. So that is boding well. Oliver Glasner, he is never beat, but has never lost to either, 2 draws. And that was while he was Fenerbahce manager, a job that he has been brought down for in the press. However, reports around this man have all noted not to judge him based off the Fenerbahce job, because apparently he was set up to fail. Now, I don't watch the Turkish league on such a level for me to comment, but if that is him with a broken squad yet again, that is a very impressive result, because Oliver Glasner, he won the Europa League with Frankfurt that year, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, he did.
That's a good result. Porto, again, while he was there, he managed against Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team, and we all know how special that team was.
No shame losing to that team.
Yeah, no shame losing there. And then the only other one is Ange Postecoglou, while they were both in China managing, with Shanghai and Yokohama respectively. 1 win, 1 loss there. So it's good to see he does have some experience against some managers in the league, even if he doesn't necessarily have the experience in it. However, do you think that's enough, Jacob?
I personally don't. I believe, like you say, for Nuno and for Marco Silva, he was at the best team in Portugal, many believe, in Porto, particularly at that time. So no, I don't believe it's enough. I'm just going to read out a few of the honours that man has. So he won 2 league titles at Porto, 2012 and 2013, which you mentioned earlier were his most successful times. But as I mentioned, you're winning the league at Porto. Did come runners up in the Super Cup, but I believe he inherited that team. I don't believe it was him that won the Europa League with that Porto team. He inherited it, so ultimately he lost the match in the Super Cup. winner of the Greek League with Olympiacos in 2015. Obviously a decent achievement, but that's what Olympiacos set out to do every year. Did win the Chinese Super League when he went over there in 2018, but I'd be lying if I told you I've ever watched a Chinese Super League game, and I'd be lying if I told you what expectations are set of Shanghai in that league. I assume that they are there to win it most years. One thing that does worry me is his longest ever stint in a job was 3 years. 2021 at Fenerbahce, 1 year. 2022 at Corinthians, 1 year. I know that happens quite a lot in South America where managers are there for 1 year, but it still does not bode well for me. 2023, Flamengo, 1 year. Al Gomez in that time at Flamengo as well, which might be a good segue for him into the Wolves camp. And now Al Shabab, he hasn't been there very long, and he's already so desperate for a move out. For me, the last manager we had like that was Bruno Lage, who would, it was almost dubbed, but he would always start well at a club and then fall off. To me,
His
it was like
his CV to me.
This man doesn't even start well at clubs anymore. It seems like he can't last at a club.
Yeah, definitely agree there, Jacob. I think to me, his CV reminds me quite ironically of Walter Zenga. That's who is standing out when you reel off these time periods spent at these clubs. I don't think it bodes very well. And like you said, covering over the cracks really at Wolves. I don't believe he's a long-term solution. And it really, to me, feels like the club are just looking for a cheap fix here. They don't seem to have got any of the replacements they did sound out for Gary O'Neill, who they did see fit to take the squad forward. However, we can't really have a say in that, unfortunately. And we're just going to have to back the man as soon as he comes into the job. And while it could easily be a great start, could get new manager bounce, could draw ourselves out, will we just fall off again by the end of the season? Will we be hanging on to the coattails of whoever's in charge by then? Who knows what state will be in come the end of the season? But things don't really look very good for us. I'm not sure this is the correct appointment. I'm not sure this is going to help us in the short term, even. A manager who only does short-term stints is never going to be a solution. All he can do is hold off the inevitable, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, with saying all this and ahhing, and like you say, we will back him when he comes in until he starts making those mistakes. He's the Wolves manager. We want to get behind him.
Yeah.
But my problem lies in the fact of, could anybody do the Wolves job with these owners? Is it the first job? It goes like that old argument that's a ridiculous argument of, you always hear, could Pep Guardiola do it at Burton Albion? We are almost a Burton Albion of this league at this point, where you're not going to have any money to compete with anyone else. You're not going to have any, you are. The only thing with us that is a positive is you're coming into inherently what is a relatively talented squad. If you can get a tune out of this squad, they are good enough to survive.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned earlier, we're in the dog now. We're 7 points off of survival. We can't have a project manager. For me, we needed someone like a David Moyes who knows this league, knows how to grind out results. Doesn't have to be pretty for the rest of the season. We just have to be, winning those games 1-0 at home. Getting over the line, make us hard to beat. And for me, it's hard to get excited over this manager because it just feels like potentially I want to look into whether he's a Mendes client, because for me it feels like, George, we've just gone to Uncle George after nothing's happened and said, what do you have for us? So I don't know whether you feel the same.
I do ultimately, Jacob. I don't think it's enough. I think Jorge Mendes is clearly not a miracle worker. He just has a very big book of clients. And while it's worked out for us in the past, I don't think that's enough in a relegation battle. I'd much rather see someone like David Moyes, like you say, who has a wealth of Premier League experience, a wealth of experience in relegation battles too. And someone like Moyes, I think, could offer us long-term stability as well as a foundation to get back on track this season. However, when it's a short-term appointment like Vitor Pereira, are we going to have that? What if he kept us up but left in the summer or got sacked earlier next season? I could easily see that being the case. I don't think he's got enough in his own tank to stick the job out for that long, and I don't see him achieving enough in this period of time. You can call me a pessimist, but I just don't think this one will work out. And I hate to say it. I don't know if you feel the same, Jacob, but I fear our fate is already sealed.
I mean, the only thing that's giving me a bit of hope is obviously it's hard not to be pessimistic with the state of the club currently, but we did have this same reaction when Gary O'Neill came in, and obviously it wasn't as sour as it got with Gary O'Neill. It was not a bad start under O'Neill last season. But for me, it just after the week we've had, it's very hard to get excited for anyone who isn't, Jose Mourinho or Pep Guardiola coming into the club. I think would have the same reaction. Originally, we thought it would have been Steve Cooper, which raises an interesting question to me. Would you have rather Steve Cooper come in than Vitor Pereira? Because I don't really know.
I think only time will tell with that one, Jacob. Steve Cooper, while I think he would send us down, who knows? He could be better than Vitor Pereira, having Premier League experience already, having already managed in the league this season specifically. He will have a wealth of resources him and his staff have used during his time at Leicester on teams in the league, already have all of that research done, analysis done. He already has all of this at his disposal, whereas Pereira is learning this on the job for a league he's never managed in. And when you're in a relegation battle, maybe someone like Steve Cooper would be a better choice in this situation. However, he is not exactly a manager that would get us excited, and I don't think the fans would support that appointment either. I think the fans as a whole, like you said, we're a fickle bunch. I think we are more likely to back this foreign manager coming from another league more than Steve Cooper, who we've seen the bad side of. If Steve Cooper was coming into this off leaving mutually at the end of last season, say, I don't think it would be bad. But the fact Leicester appointed him this summer and he's already out of a job, I think it would just be pure desperation to appoint him. And I'm glad that's not where we're going. I think also tactically, there's very different styles. Steve Cooper, I don't think he'd set us up correctly with this team. Whereas, even though Vitor Pereira, I haven't really said a good word about him myself, his style of play seems to be quickly embraced by the squads that he works for. He plays an offensive game with possession and control of the ball and high pressure. And I think that lack of intensity has been something that's really cost us the past few weeks. In this game against Ipswich on Saturday, we were screaming at the players, calling for them to press. And then it was only after a few changes in the second half, we start making pressing. We start putting all this pressure on Ipswich. They're losing the ball more. Then we're creating more chances. And that's when we really got back into the game. And we thought we could even win it at one point. But as you know, Wolves don't do that. We have lacked intensity under O'Neill. And part of it will show if the players might have downed their tools to an extent for Gary O'Neill in recent weeks. If they come out the next week raring to go, if they're out here ready to play their socks off for the fans, the manager, then maybe Gary O'Neill was a much bigger problem than we ourselves thought. And while we know how big a problem he was, we know there are much larger things looming over the club at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was about to mention about the stylistic changes between Pereira and Gary O'Neill. But on Steve Cooper, I also believe he would send us down. I don't believe he was the right man for the job at all. But in terms of his sacking at Leicester, I found it quite harsh at the time. I think in hindsight, it seems like a good decision. I know Leicester got destroyed on the weekend, but aside from that, Van Nistelrooy having a relatively good start at Leicester. But they were sat outside the relegation zone, and I mean, I use it as a comparison. I'd be to you or even my dad this weekend, but they sacked their manager, weeks before us when they were in a better position than us, and we've only sat going ill now, which speaks levels to the lack of ambition of our board, actually. But there has been 2 football matches played for Wolves this weekend. We've lightly touched on the West Ham game. I think we're probably going to leave it there for that game, as it's almost a distant memory now with everything that's gone on. It was, once again, a subpar performance. Not our worst under Gary O'Neill, far from our best. A game that was almost ironically cheered by both sets of fans. A very poor game of football in terms of quality, which I think we came to expect from both teams. Don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we touch on the Ipswich game, Cameron?
Before we touch on the Ipswich game, I just wanted to touch briefly on Pereira yet again. One problem that seems to emerge with his tactical style of play, as per reports from the clubs he's managed at, is we invite a lot of pressure with his style of play, and I'm just wondering if our defence can handle it. Quote word for word, teams have been able to carve through their midfield and defence with ease, often backing off and inviting attacking pressure, allowing shots from the edge of the box. That's been a massive problem we've already had under O'Neill. Inviting some of these screamers earlier in the season we seem to be getting every week at Molineux, all by opposition players. And it seems we invite enough pressure as it is. It feels like our midfield and defence are made of Swiss cheese with all the holes we can see in them. And I'm not sure that's going to work. I'm not sure he's able to use his preferred tactical style, because we've already proven this season we can't handle that pressure. One slight positive is that Vitor Pereira is seen as a very disciplinarian manager, and I think we really do need someone to come in, put their foot down with how the tempers are flaring up with the players the past few weeks. However, I do think the appointment is just a major gamble, and it will either pay off in the short term and keep us off, or it's just going to be the final nail in the coffin. But only time will tell. Like you said, let's move on to the Ipswich game. And I thought it was a very scrappy affair. I thought the first half, like you said, lacked real quality. I thought both teams were looking like, I hate to say it, championship teams. And I think that's an insult to some teams in the championship, of which I've watched many better quality football games in recent weeks than I have Wolves. But how many chances to score are we going to give them, Jacob? How many?
I mean, to be fair to Ipswich, I believe they didn't look like a quality side, but you could at least tell there was a system there for them, whereas we looked all over the place. You could tell their game plan was get it up to Delap, get him to hold the ball, get the likes of Hutchinson, who I thought had a fantastic game, up there with him. And that's where their first goal comes about. I mean, it should be on even framed or something, that first goal. Absolutely. Shocking. I mean, for me, I'll ask you after whether it comes into the category of poor defending or unfortunate. For me, it's a bit of both, but for me, it's O'Neill. For me, it's on Gary O'Neill, this first goal. And that might sound harsh, but for me, Nelson Semedo should not be right centre-back and having to cover. I know Totti's missed the ball completely. It was very poor. So he's had to cover. But I don't believe Liam Delap has his way with Matt Doherty the way he did with Nelson Semedo. It was almost quite upsetting to watch the way he stood no chance of getting across from Delap. Obviously, the ball coming across the goal. Sam Johnson, once again, in no man's land.
Lapping.
Matt Doherty, making a brilliant clearance off the line, and then another one which bounced in off Totti's backside. Which that part of the goal, is unfortunate. But it shouldn't have been allowed to get to that point. It was comedy gold around that. But hats off to Matt Doherty, 2 goal line blocks. But it's awful. We speak about Totti Gomez, I said, missing the original header and then just being stood like a rabbit in the headlights, and that's why it bounced off of him to go in. What are your thoughts on that comical first goal that we conceded?
Wow. It's like an utter circus out there watching us defend. Gary O'Neill said in his post-match interview, Ipswich wouldn't score that goal against any other team in the league. And I completely agree. I think that's the first time I've been saying I agree with Gary O'Neill in recent weeks. However, like you said, Jacob, I think Semedo against Delap was an absolutely silly call from O'Neill. I would have much preferred seeing Doherty and Semedo swapped around and see Doherty play a more centre-back type role coming inside. Whereas I'd rather see Semedo being the one pushing up, attacking. I understand Doc has been scoring in recent weeks, which is so crazy to me. But he is one of our better attacking outputs. When we thought by the end of last season, he'd probably be one of the ones who were on their way out. And yet here he is fighting his way back into the team because of how bad we are partially. Sorry. However, I really just think it was messy. Some great blocks on the line by Doherty. But how does this pinball in and around the edge of the box just allowed to go on for so long? Johnstone comes out and I think he just completely flaps at the ball. Johnstone, to me, does not look confident. There was quite a lot of situations during the game where he's, instead of catching it, he's just punching it away, just trying desperately to get it out his box. Who knows if that's partially down to him not trusting the defence in front of him. I could easily see that, and I could easily see why that could also be the case. However, I just don't think Johnstone is good enough. I know Jose Sarr has not had the best few weeks, but I think he's a much better goalkeeper than Sam Johnstone, regardless. And when Johnstone was brought in to replace him, I think that is just absolutely horrific from our recruitment team. I don't understand how Ipswich gets so many chances to shoot at that goal before someone eventually just gets it out. Surely, when we're under that much pressure, you don't want to be sustaining it. Kick it out for a throw-in, kick it out for a corner, anything, but get it out of that box. Don't leave it there so Ipswich can just keep on kicking it until it eventually goes in. We had a very similar chance, almost an exact replica of that chance, if not better, when someone put a cross into their box in that half also. And it just goes through the whole team. It goes through everyone. If one person there made a late run into the box, that's a goal for us. And Ipswich, they didn't even have to defend it because we just didn't do enough on the attacking front. But they have that same chance against us, slightly worse quality. And of course they score it because we can't defend. And I think we only have ourselves to blame for that. And while we can point fingers at Gary O'Neill, like you said, I think he's largely at fault. I think he's at fault for putting Nelson Semedo at centre half instead of someone with more physicality. Semedo was getting manhandled by Delap that whole game, absolutely bullied. You could tell Delap had been instructed by the manager to target him because he could outstrengthen. Every long ball that was coming over to Delap, he's able to touch it down, play it off to his teammates, the likes of Hutchinson. And they were just destroying us on the counter. We really couldn't handle that turnover. And it's just disappointing, but I feel it's a lot of the same issues we say every week.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Dave Azzopardi's pre-match thoughts, but he said you could play a tape of, every post-match thoughts over the last 3 weeks, and it would play the same.
Yeah.
For me, you mentioned Sam Johnson. He's a championship goalkeeper, and I mean that in the most respectful way possible. For me, Semedo had a really torrid time in this game as captain, but he's going to if he's being told to, play against someone like Liam Delap, who is that physical presence. Like you mentioned, the ball comes across the box in their end. There's no one to tap it in for us. But for me, the whole first half, a lot of it was, once we went 1-0 down, holding on to the ball for way too long. Mateus Cunha, we hate to dig him out, but a big advocate of it. Many times could have released the ball. Mario Lemina as well, holding on to the ball way too long. And when he did release the ball, very poor quality of passing. Same with Andre, which was quite surprised. I thought his passing was terrible on the weekend. There was one time where Lemina did get his head up and released Bellegarde in the box, who you had some very choice words about on Saturday, which I don't think can be repeated on the podcast. Nothing too bad for the imagination. It was just rather frustrated. But, it was a chance for, you've got to be getting on target if you're a Premier League footballer, one-on-one with the keeper, and he's blasted it over. He didn't even have to, just composure. Ismaila Sarr scored a goal for Palace, which ultimately, could have sent us down yesterday, I believe, where it was the same chance and he just tucks it into the corner. And that's the composure you've got to have as a Premier League footballer. He blasts it. It almost ends up at the Hawthorns. he blasts it that high. It's absolutely it's his final ball. The whole game Saturday, Bellegarde was terrible, and I don't want to dig him out, but it was absolutely shambolic on the weekend from him. And it wasn't just him, don't get me wrong. But that chance in particular is one that really stands out to me for the first half, aside from one in the second half, which we'll get onto in just a second.
I mean, Bellegarde, what were you doing at the weekend? Like you said, Jacob, I don't want to be digging players out, but I really thought it was a horrific performance from JB on Saturday. I don't think he did enough. Like you said, Ismail Assar, he had that chance and he scored against Palace. That could easily send us down. But there was another chance that was exactly the same as that Jean-Ric Bellegarde chance in the Ipswich game for Ipswich. And John Stone, fair enough to him, he pulled off a really great save, getting down low to deny, I think it was Chaplin. But wow, you've got to get that on target. You can't lose your composure enough to hit it over the bar by such a distance. I understand the chance came quickly, but it was one of our better passages of play in the whole match, I thought. It was a great team move, everybody linking up, and then when you slide it through, you see who it's falling to, being Bellegarde. You do expect him to score that. You expect him to have enough composure to finish that. At the end of the day, while he's not a natural forward, he's been playing in that position for a while. So there must be something other than his dribbling that is seen to be good enough for him to play out up top with these players when you've got the likes of Rodrigo Gomez on the bench, when you've got the likes of Guedes on the bench, which I don't agree with. However, just awful composure in honesty. I don't know how, as a Premier League footballer, you are not able to get that on target anywhere on the goal. At least make the goalkeeper work. Muric didn't have to make a save. He just watched it fly over into row Z, and that's simply not good enough in a game that you're not going to get many chances in. That is a scrappy affair. Relegation 6 point, a game like that, you have to take your chances.
Yeah, I fully agree. Just before we get on to the second half, I want to talk about half time. Obviously, where we sit, we get a quite good view of the players going down the tunnel, and the body language at half time was
atrocious.
It was almost like they knew that this was the day of reckoning for Gary O'Neill. They'd accepted it by that point. You know, dragging their knuckles at this point. Semedo, our captain, looking very, very lost for ideas, which, like the whole team, we saw Cunha, you know, as he does quite often, complaining at half time as he went down the tunnel. Although there was a slight lift for us at half time as we saw Tommy Doyle, warming up, which was probably to the best and the loudest the South Bank had been in that game so far.
Wow, definitely.
Tommy Doyle coming on. But yeah, what were your thoughts on the body language at half time? Do you think it was me personally reading too much into it, or did we look defeated at that half time whistle?
No, not at all, Jacob. I don't think you're reading too much into it in the slightest. I think they all had their head in their hands, heads down, shoulders slumped. They looked like they had no fight left in them. Whereas the Ipswich players were going in looking confident. They were going in looking like they were happy with their work, their game plan. 6 of that 11 for Ipswich, 6 members of that starting 11 were in League One 2 seasons ago. No wonder they don't have the quality in this league. No wonder they are put down as one of the teams who will probably go down. But the fact, like you touched upon way earlier, they have a system, they have clear coaching that they are working hard for in the week. You see how hard they work on that pitch. Ipswich, it's been said by many pundits this season that while they've not necessarily been getting the results, they've always been in their games. They've always made teams work hard to get points against them. And that is something we didn't do. Most other teams in this league, they've still got wins against Ipswich, or at least draws, because they work. They made Ipswich work, but we didn't make them work. We just let them play the system. We just let them play the game to their strengths. And it feels like I can say that about a lot of teams, but it's just the story with Wolves. But just to touch on something else from halftime, we did have the families and some of the representatives of our former squad from that Honved game come out at halftime to celebrate the anniversary, of which there was a special programme for as well. And I thought that was a nice look back into our history at the creation of the European Cup. But my God, Billy Wright must be rolling in his grave watching this Wolves team defend. And he must be so disappointed how a club he carried so highly, with his heart on his sleeve, with the badge over his heart, he really epitomised Wolverhampton Wanderers. And I think it was great to pay tribute to an excellent squad. However, it really does just drum home the reality and reminds you of how far we've fallen.
Yeah, but yeah, really nice tribute at half time. But Jeff Shee must use that as his toilet break or not attend the meetings where back to pitch because he has no idea of the identity of his football club. Got absolutely no idea of the history, what this football club means to people, what this football club has done in the past, what this football club done for the English game, and also as we were celebrating the European game. You know, it's almost like we're just another business, and I know that's the way football's going. I know that is the sad truth. We are just a business to Fosun. But if that's the case, then you've made your money. We've all seen you've made your money. Sell the club, get out, sell it to someone who will care, sell it to someone who will invest. But we are currently on the topic of the Ipswich game. So going into the second half, I'm going to give Gary O'Neill his flowers for a slight 10-minute decision where he did change the formation. He did bring on Gonzalo Guedes for Matt Doherty, which I did feel was a good substitution. Gonzalo Guedes immediately changing the game. Tommy Doyle changing the game. I've got them as my two standouts, which is crazy because they didn't start.
So,
You know, they Gonzalo Guedes coming on immediately, just being that bit of a live wire. You said in the ground, you know, it might be for himself, but at least he's actually running around. It might be to try and force a move, but at least he's doing something. So we go on to get our equaliser. Coming from Cunha, which bit of a weird goal. Quite muted celebrations. I think it was more relief than pandemonium, really. But we got back in. I think he'll be quite disappointed to concede the way he did at his near post as well. Obviously led to a bit of a pick-up in the atmosphere as well. What were your thoughts on the equaliser, Cam?
well, I thought it really came out of nowhere. It was one of our quite boring passages of play with the ball just getting strummed around the back, really, with no real intent. It felt like we're being passengers to the game at that point, almost. But like we touched upon, Guedes, huge impact when he came onto the pitch with him and Tommy Doyle, always making a difference, it feels, when they come off the bench. Guedes, nice pass into Cunha, and while Muric will be disappointed to be beaten at his near post, I thought it was a great finish. Maybe it caught him off guard because I half expected Cunha myself to put the ball back across the box for the likes of Jurgen Strand Larsen or someone else to tap home. However, it was a great finish, and it really did lift the atmosphere to the only point other than anti-Fosun and Jeff Shee chants that we were finally chanting, "Come on, Wanderers," and getting behind the team, thinking we might turn it around. And from that moment on, we really were pushing for the winner. I thought there were moments where we could have definitely won that game. We had quite a few clear-cut chances come about. Quite a few of those I didn't think had the best decision-making involved by some of the players. There are a couple where, while I've been singing Tommy Doyle's praises, he would shoot instead of play it through to Guedes, who was finding very open pockets of space on that right-hand side. And I thought he made a brilliant difference. But like you said, Wolves just really tired themselves out in that passage of play. They really gave it everything, pushing for a winner. They really wanted to give it us, and fair enough, they dug in deep, but it wasn't enough because Ipswich, their last real break going forwards of the game, our players look dead on their feet. They can't track back, and they get a corner. And we all know how that ends when Wolverhampton Wanderers get a corner. Some very big bodies in that Ipswich box, a lot of physical players. I know you touched upon that at the time, Jacob.
Yeah, so for the 15 minutes after our equaliser, we were more or less dominant. The biggest chance, well, one big chance falling to Mateus Cunha after a fantastic ball from Tommy Doyle. Reminded me of the Neves one against Leicester, where he wins the ball, plays it over the top to Jota at the time. This time it's just Cunha, and the finish wasn't quite as good. But yeah, the biggest chance coming to Strand Larson after a Guedes cross. The ball was hit over Larson, bit of a bounce, but I thought it was in. And many people around me thought it was in. We were up on our feet celebrating, believing we had turned it around. But ultimately, this run of pressure was our downfall, as we saw very tired legs, as you mentioned. Guedes, who'd only been on the pitch 20, 25 minutes, but it gave that much, where he was having to tell Semedo to fill in that more forward role while he sticks back and defends. And I thought he was unlucky not to concede a penalty, actually, Guedes, much as I've sung his praise, where he goes into the back of, was it Jack Clark in the box? Potentially?
I think it was Jack Clark. However, I think it would have been unfair if they were given a penalty, as the exact same thing happened for us against West Ham, and we didn't get a penalty for the exact same situation. So I think it would have been quite harsh on the boys to have that. Guedes, like you touched upon, I found it quite strange that while we seem to have all our tired players be the runners up front when we're trying to make these late breaks in the game, whereas Guedes, who just come off the bench and is an attacker, is the one who's sitting back waiting. He's not a natural defender, and you really saw that when he got absolutely done by Jack Clark for one of the Ipswich chances. And while it wasn't those that he scored from, I thought it was quite strange to see the players arrange themselves that way. But let's talk about it. We don't want to. That corner, that last chance. As we've said so many times this season, as we've seen so many times in this Wolves squad, in this campaign, we cannot see games out. We switch off before the final whistle, and we have been absolutely hammering Ipswich with chances. We had so many missed chances to rue over. We really should have done better. We really should have won that game in the chances we created. And I think it would have been unfair to Ipswich, who came in with a game plan, who put in a brilliant performance. It would have been unfair to them if we had won that game, but we definitely had the chances to, and we definitely had the cutting edge to, but we just didn't achieve it. Ipswich, their last break, some brilliant work from Hutchinson to draw players out of position. Plays through, I can't remember who it was, in honesty, to have a shot that's Al Hamadi that had a shot cannoned out for a corner. And we all know how this script goes, don't we? Corner, Jack Clark, some really big bodies in that Ipswich box. They have some huge players, and as you would do, coming up the English football pyramid so quickly like they have, League One and the Championship are very, very physical leagues, and you can see that physicality on the pitch for Ipswich. It felt like men against boys, strength-wise sometimes, but an excellent ball from Jack Clark into the box. And a great header, but this zonal marking just does not work. It feels like the players are really switched off. Jacob, what did you think about that last chance?
Well, I just knew. As soon as it went out for that corner, I think the whole ground knew. What was happening after. Even Gary O'Neill turned around, kicking a water bottle down the dugout. But for me, if your manager knows, then why hasn't it been fixed? Why are we still doing this zonal marking? We've got big blokes in that box. Jacob Greaves, who's towering for everyone. Jack Taylor, who scored, big bloke. But it's always the back post as well. It's the back post against West Ham. It's Thomas Soucek. He's good at one thing, headering the ball. Why is he not being marked? And what's even more frustrating is, the whole game was frustrating. We only turned up 15 minutes after scoring a goal. We suddenly decided to be a football team rather than playing like we'd never seen a football before. But yeah, for the goal, zonal marking again doesn't work. And he's never going to score an easier goal than that. He doesn't even have to really jump. He just leads his head towards the ball. And, got in Santi Bueno's nearly there, but nearly's not good enough. If he was man for man, he probably wins that ball, but he's been instructed to go zonal. And it cost us the game. And for me, I believe I've already said, that moment was, especially the Palace game, the moment that Wolverhampton Wanderers Premier League status had vanished, because we're now 7 points off. We need 9 to stay up, or 9 to get out. Sorry, that's 3 wins, and we need to rely on Palace or someone else dropping. that level of points. The fixture list also isn't kind to us coming up. It's shambolic at this point. No disrespect to Ipswich, but like you mentioned, 6 of their 11 players were in League One 2 seasons ago. If you can't beat them at home, you deserve to be relegated. That's as simple as it goes.
I have to agree. I don't think it was good enough by us at all. I think our squad, man for man, we have 10 times almost the quality of Ipswich. And I was really disappointed by the way that we set ourselves up. However, ultimately, that is down to the manager and where the players decide they need to go on that pitch. I did find it quite strange that Guedes was sitting at right back at times when some of our more tired players are the ones pushing up, making the runs, looking for a winner. And Guedes, he is not a proper defender. That's why he got grilled by Jack Clark at a time. And it's just not good enough, really. I find some of the positions quite strange, like you touched upon with the midfield at the time, Jacob. The midfielders are often higher than the forwards. Ait Nouri often being directly on the wing. You've got Cunha coming into midfield at left back sometimes. Players don't seem to know their own positions on the picture walls, and I think that really translates to part of the problem. But it's another loss, another corner, and another one we should have really done better with, Jacob. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's the system, like I said at the time. The midfielders are having to fill in. We're playing with no wingers. Off our wing back, especially we're playing Matt Doherty. I love the guy, but he's offering that attacking output at times anymore. So having to fill in pockets on the left, on the right, creates a massive hole. Hence why people like João Gomez are constantly have to take one for the team. Ultimately racking up in enough yellow cards for suspension. But like you say, another loss. So all we can do is look to the future, and that starts on Sunday, a game that you're actually going to. Surprising your brother with some last-minute tickets for his birthday. I'm sure. Are you looking forward to it?
Not really, Jacob. I mean, I was looking forward to it when I got the tickets, when we won that away day battle, but I don't feel like there's any real winners in our fan base having to watch this quality of football. I am interested to see how we line up. Obviously, having a new gaffer by the time we play the match Sunday, he will have very limited training time, very limited time to try and lift this dressing room, try and get them seeing his tactical vision. And I'm interested to see how we fare. I don't really know how to predict the lineup, how to predict the score line for Sunday's game, but without João Gomez, if I'm correct, without Totti, if I'm correct.
I think it's João back. João back.
I wasn't sure if it was 2 games or 1. We'll soon see.
It's 1, and it's only 5. 5 bookings.
Okay.
So,
well, that's some positive news. However, I am expecting to see a Cunha suspension before Sunday. And with that, I really think our hopes of winning are in the bin, to be honest. Without him, I'm not sure what we're capable of. And it's really disappointing to see that from Cunha, because it's really a crunch game against Leicester. They've just suffered a heavy defeat to Newcastle. And this is a game where we should really be there to capitalise. But without our star player, I'm not sure I see us getting the right result, especially with limited time for seemingly Vitor Pereira to train his squad. Jacob, how do you predict this affair Sunday going?
Well, hopefully Pereira is in the dugout. Nothing officially announced. He might not be there. He might get Steve Davis in the dugout, but who knows what is going to happen in regards to the manager. For me, like I say, Cunha is going to be a massive miss. Ryan Ait-Nouri also get his second yellow card at the end of the game. Going to be a big miss, particularly if you say Totti's missing as well. So who's going to play left back? I assume Matt Doherty, probably.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, which speaks levels for itself, I have someone like Aduwu running at Matt Doherty. It might be a very long afternoon for Wolves just before Christmas, but I hope you enjoy it anyway. I said to my dad after the game, want to just do as many away games as possible now, which sounds stupid, but you never know when we're going to have a chance to do these stadiums again.
Definitely.
The unfortunate luck at the moment. But let's hope that Pereira is in. Let's hope we have that bit of a new manager out. And let's hope it's the start of Wolves' turnaround their fortune. As much as we might not see it. But in a what is a very negative podcast, I'm going to try and sprinkle a bit of positivity and sound stupid and predict a 2-1 win for Wolves Sunday. I don't expect you to echo them thoughts, but what are your thoughts, Head?
I was half tempted to match your prediction, in honesty. I'm really hoping for a bit of new manager bounce, but I feel we just concede too many goals. And I think based on the reports of his tactical style, I feel like the pressure we concede is still going to be similar, if not more levels. I'm going to say 2-2. I'm hopeful we get a point at least under a new manager. And this team at Leicester just took a heavy thrashing at St James's. So I'm hoping that their morale's took a slight dip, but I think they'll be a lot more prepared for this game than we are. The only positive I really see us having is that they also won't know how we're going to line up under a new manager. We don't know as fans how this new system is going to play, what personnel he's going to choose to carry it out, but only time will tell. I'll be there Sunday to cheer the team on, and hopefully we get a result.
Yep, so going to wrap it up there. This has been a roller coaster of a podcast, which sums up a roller coaster of a week, really. So many things to talk about on this podcast. Hopefully we covered them all. I've been your host, Jacob Jones, once again joined by Cameron Gorman. Thank you for joining me. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
This is KIC Radio.